Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching your evening operational briefing for March 30th, 2026, and today delivered on almost every front simultaneously. We start with a correction that turns out to be good news. Primorsk is fully under Russian control. The earlier assessment of a Ukrainian comeback was wrong. 2 soldiers, not a counter-offensive. And while we are on the Zaporizhzhia direction, a new development on the eastern flank. The East grouping has confirmed improved positions at Lyhivska, and the direction of the next push, north toward the Huliapol corridor, is becoming clearer. On the Sloviansk direction, the moment many have been waiting for, a Russian flag raised in the westernmost part of Oleksandrivka. The first documented visual confirmation of entry into the settlement. We will put it in proper context. One position is not control, but the direction of travel is unambiguous. In Kupansk, the Russian Ministry of Defense is claiming both Kovsharivka and Novusinova. If confirmed, that closes the battle for the eastern bank of the Oskil. We will walk through why verification matters here, given the scale of the object. And in the Middle East, oil opened Monday at $102 WTI, 115 Brent. The verbal intervention playbook is finished. Trump issued a new ultimatum, this time threatening water desalination plants. Iran responded by tightening Hormuz further, and the political math in Washington is increasingly pointing away from a ground operation. A full breakdown across both theaters. Let us get into it. In the night of March 30th, the Ukrainian side conducted a mass strike against Russian territory, directing the main drone waves toward the southern regions, Rostov-on-Don and Krasnodar. A significant portion of the drones was intercepted on approach in the Taganrog area. The Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed the destruction of 102 Ukrainian drones. No objective control footage documenting strike consequences in southern Russia was published over the past 24 hours, allowing the conclusion that this attack direction was effectively repelled. A second Ukrainian drone wave was directed eastward toward the Luhansk region. Several explosions were recorded in the Alkhevsk area, in the immediate vicinity of the Alkhevsk metallurgical plant. Footage from the Luhansk area showing a Ukrainian drone presumably controlled via the Starlink system was published, indirectly confirming the Ukrainian side's sustained ability to operate UAVs at significant range. The Russian side deployed 165 drones for a strike against Ukraine during the same night. No footage of strike consequences was published. That said, a video material appeared over the past 24 hours that warrants separate attention. The use of a Russian interceptor drone was recorded, which destroyed a Ukrainian UAV without self-destructing, preserving its own combat capability for continued patrol. This indicates a transition toward the concept of reusable counter-drone assets, capable of substantially increasing air defense effectiveness against mass drone attacks. Zaporizhzhia. Direction: Lyhivska and the eastern flank. On the Zaporizhzhia direction today, the Russian Ministry of Defense, together with the eastern grouping, confirmed a substantial improvement of positions in the Lyhivska area. The settlement itself had previously been included in the Russian zone of control based on geolocations received during the fighting for Bilohiria. What is noteworthy, however, is that the statement was made by the eastern grouping, not by Dnipro grouping, which is traditionally considered responsible for the Orekhov direction. Several days ago, the attack from the south, from the Robotyne direction, was conducted by Dnipro. Now eastern grouping is reporting results at Lyhivske to the east. This indicates that at least 2 separate grouping formations are operating on this direction, which in itself signals a force buildup. The operational question is the direction of further advance. 2 variants are under consideration. The first, movement westward toward Primorsk and Orekhov, with the objective of striking the rear of the Ukrainian grouping in the Orekhov agglomeration. The second, movement northward toward the T0814 highway, connecting Orekhov with Huliapol, with the objective of enveloping Ukrainian positions in the areas of Huliapol, Novosilka, and Charivini. Given the attacking forces' affiliation with the eastern grouping, the northern vector appears more probable. It fits logically into the overall scheme of catching the Orekhov grouping in a pincer. Increased activity and new map corrections from this sector should be expected in the near term. The use of TOS-Sontsepek thermobaric systems on this direction has been noted. On the northern Zaporizhzhia sector, no cartographic changes. That said, an increasing number of neutral and pro-Ukrainian mapping resources are acknowledging the Russian army's transition to a counter-offensive in this sector. The movement involves infiltration northward toward settlements lost during the February-March Ukrainian counter-offensive. The scale and tempo of this infiltration will become clearer in the coming days. Clarification on Primorsk. The situation is considerably better than expected. Several assessments from previous briefing editions require correction, and in this case, the correction turns out to be favorable. Earlier, based on published video materials, assessments suggested possible Ukrainian control over a significant portion of Primorsk. Direct contact with units on the ground has refuted this picture. Primorsk is under full Russian control. The documented fact of Ukrainian personnel presence in the settlement involved 2 soldiers who had filtered into the village and were hiding in houses. They were detected and destroyed. No other Ukrainian presence in Primorsk exists. Simultaneously, the first verified footage from Rechna in 2 months has been received. As a reminder, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced the capture of Rechna as far back as January 30th. But objective control footage appeared only now. Russian presence in the southern part of the settlement has been documented. This simultaneously confirms control over Primorsk. The geographic disposition of positions in Rechny excludes Ukrainian presence in the adjacent Primorsk. Moreover, according to available data, Russian infantry units are already operating on the opposite bank of the Konka River, without full consolidation as yet, in a reconnaissance mode, probing Ukrainian defenses. Incursions into Stepnohirsk and Veselanka are also being recorded. The overall operational picture on the western flank of the Zaporizhzhia direction is considerably better than it appeared several days ago. Dobropilya direction. Syrskyi and Syrskyi. On the Dobropilya direction, 2 small corrections have been recorded. The first, in the area north of Molodetska, south of Syrskyi, footage of Ukrainian multiple rocket launcher strikes against Russian unit positions was published. A small map correction has been entered on this basis. Strikes against this area indirectly confirm the continuation of Russian infiltration towards Syrskyi by small groups. The logic of applying MLRS fire to this sector indicates precisely the documented Russian presence there. The second, the status of the southwestern part of Belitska has been clarified. Previously, this sector was marked as Ukrainian. Today, the first footage confirming confident Russian presence in this sector was received. The map has been corrected. Assault operations in Belitska continue. Costantinovka direction. Advance in the center. On the Costantinovka direction, confirmed changes have been recorded over the past 24 hours. Footage of Ukrainian FPV drone strikes against Russian positions in the industrial complex area in the central part of Costantinovka was published. Based on this footage, a conclusion has been drawn of Russian unit advance onto the territory of this complex and zone of control expansion further northward. Russian units are approaching closely to the key logistics routes along which the Ukrainian side transfers reserves into the southern part of the city. The closer Russian forces get to these routes, the harder it becomes for Ukraine to sustain the combat capability of its grouping in the southern districts, where the most intense fighting is currently underway. Pro-Ukrainian sources are also recording an expansion of the Russian infiltration zone in the Stepanivka and Dova Balka areas. Bombardment of the central and southern part of Costantinovka continues. Further corrections from this direction should be expected in the near term. Sloviansk direction. A flag in Rye-Oleksandrivka. On the Sloviansk direction, an event occurred today requiring separate documentation. A video material dedicated to the fighting for Rye-Oleksandrivka was published. In the final seconds of the footage, Russian soldiers are seen raising a flag in the westernmost part of the settlement. This is the first documentary confirmation of Russian consolidation directly on the territory of Rye-Oleksandrivka. The limitations of this evidence must be understood. A flag at the extreme western point does not mean control over the settlement as a whole. This concerns a single position. Nevertheless, it is a significant episode. After many days of reports about approaching Rye-Oleksandrivka, The first verified visual confirmation of entry into it has finally arrived. In parallel, aviation strikes were conducted against Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. According to available data, a strike was delivered against a bridge along the Syrskyi River between the western and eastern banks, one of the key logistics arteries in this sector. Lyman direction. The noose tightens. On the Lyman direction, Russian forces continue to methodically build pressure. Over the past several days, control has been established over a number of logistics routes south of Lyman, on the stretch between Starodubivka, Ryhorodok, Brusivka, Syrskyi Caravan, and Shurov. This means the progressive narrowing of the supply corridor for the Ukrainian garrison in the city. Serious cartographic corrections from this direction should be expected in the near term. Kupansk direction. The conclusion of the battle for the eastern bank of the Oskil. Kupansk direction. The most important news of the day. The Russian Ministry of Defense today reported the establishment of full control over Novosinov. Yesterday brought a report of advances in the Kovsharivka area. Map corrections have been entered on the basis of both reports. A caveat is necessary, however. A number of reliable pro-Russian sources indicate that official Ministry of Defense reports do not fully correspond to actual conditions on the ground. A portion of authoritative mapping resources are withholding changes pending receipt of objective control footage. Taking this into account, the corrections have been entered with a notation indicating the expectation of visual confirmation. Nevertheless, if the data on the capture of Kovsharivka and Novosinove does indeed correspond to reality, then March 30, 2026 can be recorded as the date of conclusion of the battle for the eastern bank of the Oskil River on the northern Kupiansk direction in the area of the Kupiansk agglomeration. The scale of the object must be emphasized. Kovsharivka is a settlement with a pre-war population of approximately 18,000 people, comparable in size to Huliopol and Rodinsky combined. Final verification of control over an object of this scale requires multiple independent video materials from different parts of the settlement. The Middle East, oil at $102, Trump's new ultimatum. On Monday, March 30th, financial markets opened and immediately priced in everything that had occurred over the weekend. The baseline, on Friday, March 27th, WTI closed at $96.164 and Brent at $110.41. From the opening of Asian markets on Monday, oil immediately moved upward. By morning, WTI was trading at $102 and Brent at $115. The increase amounted to approximately $5 to $6 from the opening. A week ago, a similar spike was arrested by Trump's announcement of an energy ceasefire, after which oil fell to $88. Last week, an attempt to repeat this maneuver, announcing a 10-day extension of the ceasefire, no longer worked. Today, the market is completely ignoring verbal interventions. The instrument is exhausted. In response, the US president issued Iran a new ultimatum, this time of a principally different level of severity. If Iran does not unblock the Strait of Hormuz, the United States will strike not only military and nuclear facilities, but also power plants and water desalination stations. The latter is extraordinary. Desalination stations are first necessity humanitarian infrastructure in a region with acute freshwater scarcity. The threat of striking them signals a transition to a fundamentally different level of pressure. Iran responded by declaring that henceforth all vessels will transit the Strait of Hormuz exclusively in accordance with Iranian national law. Several tankers that attempted unauthorized passage were destroyed. Transit remains open only to states friendly to Iran, China, India, Pakistan. Strikes against Persian Gulf infrastructure. The Iranian strike campaign against Persian Gulf state facilities continues with mounting intensity and new target categories. In Kuwait, a strike against a desalination station was conducted. Thermal anomalies in the area of the facility have been recorded. This is the first documented strike against a water supply facility, a precedent that goes beyond attacks on energy and industrial infrastructure. In Bahrain, strikes against energy infrastructure continue. Comparative satellite imagery before and after strikes has been published. In the UAE, strikes against gas compression stations in the southern part of the country. Facilities handling gas transit to Saudi Arabia's port infrastructure. satellite imagery records a fire in this area. The logic of the Iranian campaign is evident. The sequential destruction of industrial, energy, and now water infrastructure of coalition allies is designed to break the political will of Gulf states and simultaneously drive the economic cost of the conflict to a level unacceptable to global markets. Ground operation, political constraints. Against the backdrop of mounting escalation, voices warning of catastrophic electoral consequences of a ground operation are becoming increasingly prominent in American political discourse. The Democratic opposition is stating directly, the launch of a ground campaign threatens Republicans with the loss of 60 to 70 seats in the House of Representatives. With any personnel casualties, this scenario would mean a crushing defeat for the Republican Party and the transfer of lower chamber control to the Democrats. This constraint is not military in character, it is political, and it is precisely this constraint that appears to be shaping the current American strategy. The scenario in which the United States limits itself to large-scale airstrikes before exiting the active phase, leaving regional allies, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Israel, to confront a weakened Iran independently while receiving American weapons supplies, is increasingly being discussed as a realistic alternative to a ground operation. That said, a number of Western and American publications continue to point to a possible start of a limited ground operation as early as the beginning of April 2026. No final decision has been made. And it is precisely this uncertainty that is the primary factor keeping oil markets in a state of sustained upward movement. Consolidated assessment. March 30th formed a picture across both theaters in which the intensification of operations is occurring simultaneously with the clarification of key uncertainties. On the Ukrainian theater, the situation on the Zaporizhzhia direction is better than expected. Primorsk and the flanks are under control. Consolidation in Oleksandrivka has been documented. On the Kupansk direction, the possible conclusion of the battle for the eastern bank of the Oskil awaits visual verification. On the Lyman and Costantinovka directions, pressure continues to build. Kupansk has been documentarily confirmed as an active combat zone. On the Middle Eastern theater, oil has broken through $100, verbal interventions are exhausted, a strike against a Kuwaiti desalination station has marked a new threshold, and political constraints in Washington are making the scenario without a ground operation increasingly realistic. April on both theaters is shaping up as a month of resolutions. Briefing compiled as of the evening of March 30th, 2026. The situation on both theaters continues to develop actively.